So good afternoon, everyone. It's Dan Scarborough here with Data Center Hawk. Very excited today. I'm with Roger Süess who's the CEO of Green Data Center. They're based in Zurich, which is one of the new markets that we've added to the platform. And he's going to tell us about the Zurich market, about Green Data Center. And we're going to find out more over the next few minutes.
Focus on cloud and colocation, data center industry trends, the dynamic market.
So Roger, maybe if you could first of all just introduce yourself and Green Data Center and give us a bit of the story of how you came to where you are today.
Sure, yeah. Hi Dan, hi everyone. It's Roger Süess. I'm running Green Data Center, or Green, the whole group, since back of 2019. Previously been in the IT industry for good 25 years, mostly with the banking industry. So as you know, a lot of those kind of still to this day, but certainly in the early days, owned their own data center and certainly sort of throughout the stack basically owned their own infrastructure. That just started to change more and more. I always worked in the infrastructure space and then most recently before joining Green at UBS run the cloud business office, which was responsible of the cloud strategy for that large bank and also the way it transforms the IT towards cloud usage. And so you could almost argue it's a natural progression to then go and actually run those services on the other side. So with Green Data Center and Green in general, we offer two big parts of services. One more sort of consumer and small to medium business side, which is all sorts of services from a triple play to data center to private cloud type techniques and cloud access. And then the data center side very much focuses on the big enterprises as well as the hyperscale market, doing large deployments, enabling clouds, but also accompanying that whole journey towards cloud and towards a modern digital infrastructure.
Cool. So for the benefit of our audience, can you just maybe explain your current footprint in Zurich from a co-location perspective? And I know you've had some exciting news about the new campus you're developing. If you could maybe tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, no, the pleasure. Yeah, I think if you look at the footprint today, we run out of 4 locations, 2 major hyperscale campuses, and that's where the exciting news happened. That originally we had a one such campus, which already was heavily used in a nice sort of mixture of more classic colo type load and hyperscale load. And we were able now to add an additional such campus, allowing us to not only serve the businesses that we serve already, but allow companies that want to scale out and want to enter into Switzerland and Zurich to have a 2 AC setup right from within sort of the Green ecosystem, and then grow from there. The other 2 I call satellite at this stage. They're sizable data centers, more focused on the classic load, particularly banking and insurance industry that we have there. So running now a total of 5 data centers already. We'll add a 6th one with the new campus and have growth basically of another sort of like 6 to 8 data centers that we are in the process of building according to our strategy.
It's exciting. So it's very interesting because the Zurich market has kind of taken off, if you like, or seems to have taken off over the last couple of years. So could you give us a bit of a history as to how the Zurich data center market has developed as a tier 2 co-location over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think it's a right observation. It's a true change that we also observe. I think where I also get a lot of questions sort of capacity-wise. People look at what's been built by the big providers like ourselves, and they're sort of asking, are you guys creating an overcapacity? And I often say, it's yes and no. So if you look at the market, I think where the shift happened is from those classic sort of like 4 megawatt, 5 megawatt type data centers towards the bigger campuses. And one of the reasons is where actually in the very past, sort of like a lot of the big companies would have owned their own data centers. And so you had more smaller, medium-sized companies that couldn't afford or couldn't get the expertise to run these to actually buy into the colo market. So there was enough demand on that lower end of the scale to have multiple providers providing smaller data centers, and that was what the market was looking for. And I think now the shift that you're seeing is a lot of those bigger, and particularly the early and sort of the innovators basically in the digital space, they start to adapt cloud, and they're looking for data center providers that can span that whole cycle, so that they can do data center exits of their own facilities, but still have that journey sort of run down as they can afford it, and as the compliance and everything allows. And so you see the big ones really winning, that have the ability to home the big, whether it's hyperscalers in the cloud or social or big data or AI, and also hold that colo, that more classic colo load of those companies that are in transition towards cloud. And so I think that's one of the big shifts that we're seeing, and also very much the core of our strategy on how we develop our footprint right now.
So do you think that, I mean, so I definitely agree with you. I mean, we're hearing that there is significant demand from the large cloud providers. I suppose what I've been trying to get my head around is how much of this hyperscale demand is driven by kind of Swiss requirement for cloud computing, if you like, or how much of it is them shifting their capacity from more traditional flat markets like Frankfurt, for instance. So where Frankfurt's becoming more competitive, more expensive, we can touch on in a minute. Are you seeing, do you think it's that, or do you think so do you think you're stealing capacity from more traditional markets, or do you think it's a natural evolution of the demand in Switzerland?
I mean, what we are seeing, and that might be different across different providers, but we basically see 3 trends that are driving demand within our facility. One is really that we have that shift where Switzerland's probably slightly behind some other locations where those traditional companies start to adapt cloud, right? And so that's the local domestic sort of demand, either in terms of cloud adoption directly of the big clouds, or in terms of data center exits. So that's a trend 1 that we're seeing. Trend 2 that we're seeing as well is that Switzerland sort of got rediscovered, with regards to digital and data and hosting data, and just having a very stable environment, whether it's how the labor market behaves, how our infrastructure is sort of set up, or how the political field is. It's very stable, and so you see assets, particularly digital assets, sort of finding their way into Switzerland, which we kind of could very quickly get our head around, but still were surprised that took off so well. And then, yes, I think, but really just at the tone right now, we do see, or we do have conversations where service providers are asking to plan capacity so that they can actually move out of some of the more traditional locations or tier 1 locations. Some driven by price, I think, some driven also by just pure available capacity and a bit their setup. As they entered Europe, a lot of them had to just pick up what was available, and so they have a quite scattered landscape. And so what we see and hear in discussions is that they are looking on how they consolidate, in some cases even start building their own, and then use other locations as expansion space.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So just, I mean, you touched on this, didn't go into details, but I know people watching this are going to be interested in the pricing, right? And the price differential, roughly, from say Frankfurt to Zurich. What does that look like, or how do you compare in terms of from a pricing perspective?
Yeah, I wouldn't, as you could imagine, I wouldn't go into sort of absolute pricing. What we do see, however, is that a lot of people are surprised if they have the discussions with big providers like ourselves, where, of course, as always, Switzerland, basically the standard expectation is, Switzerland being fairly high priced. Which, if you take everything into account, it's actually not the case. So we do stack up quite well with the major European markets. Keep in mind that in many discussions, we may get a quick ask whether that price is euro or Swisses. And that alone is a 120 difference. So in some cases, we are even surprised positively, as people initially think it's euros where it's Swisses. So we're quite competitive in that regard. Yeah.
And what about the power price? Where would you compare in terms of the power costs to, say, somewhere like Frankfurt, which is quite expensive? I think it's 16 euro cents, maybe a bit more on the per kilowatt hour on the pricing. Are you about the same, or are you lower?
Yeah, so you do as well, sort of, I think, comparable to slightly better. I mean, we wouldn't compare with Scandinavian nations, but there is different things that you need to consider. The further north you get, you may get a good power price, but you also have to take into consideration, what's the network latency and how costly is sort of to get the right level of connectivity up there. If you look at Switzerland being sort of optimally placed, particularly if you do bigger scale latency, somewhat sensitive services, you're bang in the middle of Europe. So you can serve Europe quite well. Power-wise, comparable to cheaper. Now, in our case, we do power as pass-through. It's also a Swiss regulation that you can't make money on power. You of course you have to kind of do all the stuff that you need to treat the power and kind of get it there. But it's by the way the markets got liberated, is sort of a path through. And so what we do, and green being a bit agenda, we do push quite a bit to get optimal power, sustainable, renewable power, and deliver that at the market, a competitive price. Often also buying throughout Europe. So it's not that all the power has necessarily have to be produced locally.
So just a couple of last questions. Are you, so green, you're predominant, well, you're 100% focused on Switzerland at the moment. Is there any intention for you to expand geographically? Are you thinking about kind of developing into other locations, or what's part of your strategy moving forward?
Yeah, it's a question I get quite often, and the answer might be a bit boring. That right now we looked at, we've been even asked by clients, would you be willing to do something for us in Frankfurt or Spain or elsewhere? Right now, just with all the stuff that we have on the plate, the expansion that we do in our campus 1, and of course the new campus that gets built out. Right now, the focus is really on Switzerland, but never say never. I think we could see us expand more broadly towards Europe. Yeah.
Okay, so then it's the last couple of questions. COVID, which has clearly had a massive impact, both in a positive way for this industry segment, but in a negative way internationally. How's that impacted kind of demand and also then your operational and development side of things? Is it slowing? I'm assuming you're saying, is it slowing you down in any way, or?
I'm not really. I think we were, as you say, I think generally the digital industry was a beneficiary of that pandemic, just the way adoption took place, barriers got broken down, there's lots of taboos previously, whether it's regulation, other things that suddenly could be overcome. And so we saw a good healthy addition in demands on the consumer side, as people started to consume more services and wanted more bandwidth, as well as the data center. I think in the data center, we saw just different ways. So I think the people leading already, they kind of doubled down on digital. The ones that were already late followers and may have been more broadly hit by the pandemic, there we saw some hesitation, or at least sort of ask, we do want to get there. Can you hold another quarter? Because we have to figure out whether we can afford and how we would look like in a quarter's more time. So there, I think it was a mixture, but overall still very positive and up. Construction-wise, similarly, I think Switzerland is a bit different. You'll see a lot of emphasis on, understanding the local market, understanding the local regulations, treating the various authorities, which I know is something that's particularly difficult for some of the international folks that come into Switzerland. But then on the flip side, I think Switzerland was very keen to keep the industry as such running. So you didn't have any of the constructions closing down. They all had to take the necessary measures, but they all progressed. So for us, it was overall was really positive year.
Okay. So final question for you. The market in Europe is clearly, we're seeing it heating up, and we're seeing a lot of new kind of entrance into the market, North American operators moving to Europe. And I think we've seen some of that activity in Zurich with one or two operators. Are there any key barriers to entry for those new operators, and is there enough demand to go around for them? Are you seeing that being an issue with kind of new entrants in the market, or?
Yeah, I think, on one hand, we do appreciate competition, so we don't mind per se, but I think what people have to be cautious about is just the way Switzerland works and sort of locally operates. It can serve Europe, but it's not part of Europe in terms of union standards and so forth. So I think that's often where we see the difference, and also one of our benefits is, we've been around since 25 years, been in the business, have all the contacts with the authorities and on the ground. And I think that Switzerland may be even more local in terms of execution than some of the other markets, where you could easily sort of bring people in and move people around. That often is the hurdle that we see for them, and certainly now COVID made it even more difficult. We are very lucky that we have all the knowledge, all the expertise, everything under one roof. Allows us literally from design throughout construction execution down to running and sustaining, all of it done within one company, from one company. That's a unique, differentiation. I think that's where I see the difficulty, but the market is big, so it is an exciting market to be in.
Well, Roger, thank you for taking the time to speak with us, and we're excited to see how the Zurich market develops, and hopefully we will reconvene in a year's time and see how you guys are getting on with the new campus.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Dan.